Good morning. It's Isru Chag of Sukkot. Baruch Hashem is a wonderful yontif. And now we go back into the winter's month. Baruch Hashem. Today's share is Perek Gimel of Sheviis. Excuse me. Is Perek Gimel of Sheviis. And today's share is sponsored Eli Nishmas, Aaron Nachman, and Simcha Cohen, Yeshua Mordechai ben Shepsel, Baruch Hasar b'Shmuel Leib, Moshe ben Yosef, and Sheviis having Aliyah. And for Shlema Adasar Bas Kleya B'Sok Shar Chal Yisrael. And here we go. The Perek starts off today talking about fertilizing the field during Shemitah. Me'emasai Mishnah Aleph. Me'emasai Motzian Zavalim Lashbasos. When during Shemitah is the person allowed to take manure out to his field to store it there in heaps? He may do so after those who work the fields on Shemitah finish fertilizing for the season. When you fertilize the field, it's usually you're spreading it out over the length and breadth of the field. And if you're to store it, you're just going to store it up in one big pile, and that's not called using fertilizer. If you ever noticed, if you live in colder climates, they have like storehouses for salt for the roads for the winter, and then during storms they would like put it in the trucks and spread them along the roads, but in the summer months you see like these big piles and piles of salt that's sitting there because they're not being used. So it's the same way they would store fertilizer, just put a big pile. So once it no longer has the Marasian issue, if it looks like you're doing something wrong, and he's not allowed to do it, it's mutter. But once they're no longer fertilizing and they just want to store it, anyone knows it's just being stored, not actually using it for the field, then according to then as mutter did Rabbi Meir according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, Sheviis, excuse me, Sheviis hamasuk. Once the manure is dried up and it becomes and it's now it's dry, then he can take it to his field for purposes of storage. Because for fertilizer to be properly effective, it has to be moist. If it's dry, then it's not acting as fertilizer. I guess if he wants to use it next year, he's going to have to put some water into it or something. Rabbi Yossi says, "Kasher." Sorry. Once it becomes knotty, when it begins to dry up and thicken, and its pieces become knotted to one another, then he can take it to his field and store it there. You're talking about like a difference of like a short time between all three shitas. Okay, Mishnah base. Ad kama mizablu. How much manure may a person pile in his fields with purposes of storage? Ad shalosh aspasos lebesa. You can make up to 3 piles at each base of the field. Again, we said that the base is about 2,500 square amas, which is roughly between 6,200 to 9,700 square feet. Shall eser meshvelos shall lesech. Each pile consisting of at least 10 containers of manure, each of which holds at least 1 lesech, which is 15 saw. Therefore, each of the 3 piles must contain at least 10 10 less, which is 150 saw. Mosifin al hamshvelos. You may add to the number of containers in each pile. They mosifin al hashpasos. But he may not add to the number of piles per besa, because if he makes more than one, if he makes more than 3 piles in an area of the size, he would appear to be fertilizing the field. For Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Half al hashpasos, he may even add to the number of piles per besa, since he's heaping the manure into the large piles and spreading it. He does not appear to be fertilizing the field, regardless of the number of piles. Excuse me. Hey, my throat is a little rough after some throat. Moving on. Mishnah Gimel. A person may make 3 piles per base in his field. Mikan Maxiv. And if he wishes to make more than that number of piles, he may make as many as the legs of a pot. The pot usually had like 3 legs. And then he can make as many piles as he wants. This is according to Rabbi Shimon. But the Chachamim forbade him from making more than 3 piles unless he lowers the side of each pile 3 tvachim below the ground or raises it 3 tvachim above the ground. When the base of the pile is at least 3 tvachim below or above the ground, it's clearly he intends only to gather the manure in one place and not to fertilize his field. Therefore, the Chachamim agree that making more than 3 piles is allowed, but you have to make a hacker that it's not for use; it's just for storage. Osa Adam as Zivlo. Oh, sorry. A person may make all his manure into one large storage pile, meaning instead of making 3 separate piles of 10 lesach each, you may dump all 30 lesach into a single pile and add it to it without limit. Maybe mayor oster ad yamik shlosha or ad shebia shlosha. The mayor answers one to make a single pile that contains more than 30 lesach unless he lowers it 3 tvachim into the ground or raises it 3 tvachim above the ground, like you said before. Hayla dava muat most of a holich. One has only a small amount. If one has only a small amount of manure, he may store it in a pile in his field and then add to it bit by bit. Rabbi Elazar ben Isaiah says he answers one to store a small amount in his field unless he lowers or raises the pile 3 tvachim either up or down, as we discussed. Al hasela, or unless he puts the manure on a boulder. Why a boulder? You know, you can place a small amount on a boulder because nothing can be planted on a boulder. No one's planting on like rocks or stones or boulders or anything. So clearly he's not using it as fertilizer there. If none of these options are available, then he must wait until he has collected the minimum amount and then take it all out at once in order to avoid suspicion. Okay, Mishnah Dal. Sorry. Oh, this is going to be a fun show to watch over. Hamedaya Esadeyo Oses Sahar, the base of sign. One who wants to pen his animals in his field on Shemitah may make the enclosure no larger than 2 base up, which is 5,000 square amos. So that the animals will deposit their waste only in that area and not all over the field. that shows that he is not using the waste as fertilizer. Larger than that, and he would be a problem. Okay, shalosh size. Once these two base cells are filled with waste, he may pull out the fences on three sides of the closure, leave the remaining middle fence in place, and then build a second enclosure on the other side of the middle fence. Nimsim and Dyer base Arbasa. Then, which comes out that in the end, he will be found to have penned off a total of 4 base saw, 2 base saw of the first enclosure, and then 2 base saw of the second enclosure. Shimon ben Gamliel says base Shmona Shon. He may erect 4 enclosures, one after the other. The man described above. The first 2, then the second 2, the third, then the fourth 2. Thereby fencing a total of 8 base saw. Haisa Kosa Dea base Arba sawin. If his entire field is only 4 base saw, in which case, after making the second enclosure, you would have fenced in the entire field. The Shayan Mena mixes with name Maris Ayin. He must leave part of it empty without any animals, because otherwise he would give the appearance of doing something wrong. Maris Ayin. Everything to do is mutter, but you don't want people to start yapping about you that. Do you see what he did in his field? Shemitah? It's a bunch of yentas. He must remove the manure from the enclosed area and place it in its field in piles, just like those who take manure to the fields are allowed to do. He may form 3 piles with at least 10 lesech each per base saw. And moving on to Mishnah Hay. Mishnah Hay. Lo yiftach adam bechatsev b'tchila l'sostiv. A person may not begin to expose a quarry in his field. What's a quarry? A quarry is basically like you're exposing rock and to cut stone. You have a big field and there's a lot of stones and rocks in it. And by removing those rocks and stones, people are going to suspect you of preparing the land for planting. Because why else are you removing the stones and the rocks? Maybe if you had a granite yard and you could make a lot of money off of that stone, they sell the granite. Your intention is not for the field. But otherwise, you're removing. You see very often that when they're building homes and they do excavation, you're gonna see the guys coming and taking all the rocks out and all the stones and all the things that are not usable, and then they dig out all the dirt and then they pour the foundation. But they have to get rid of the rocks. And if you just have a field, if you take out the rocks, then obviously that's the impression is that that's going to be for planting. That's going to be a problem on Shemitah. Ad shiur bo shlosha rubios shein shalosh al shalosh ad rum shalosh. This is forbidden unless the quarry has in exposed sections a rock large enough to provide 3 blocks of stone, each measuring 3 amos wide by 3 amos long, with a height of 3 amos. Shiuran esri b'sheva avanim, such that their size, which is the total size of all 3 blocks, is enough to produce 27 pieces of stone, each of which measure 1 amma wide by 1 amma long by 3 ammas high. Since a large mass of rock is already exposed, and everyone will realize that the site is already a quarry. It's like a stone yard, and and then the owner is not going to have any problem moving from it on Shemitah, because obviously the purpose of removing the stone is for building and not to prepare the land for planting. No one says you can't build on Shemitah, you just can't plant. Gader sheyesh bo asara avanim Shamasoi Shnaim Shnaim. Mishnah Vav. If a fence has in it at least 10 stones, each of which is a load for two men, Elu, you're not telu. They may be removed. You can take down the fence and remove the stones from the field, because you will not be suspected of dismantling such a large and important fence just to plant a strip of ground beneath it. Shiur God there asar tvachim. However, this law applies only when the height of the fence, is at least 10 tvachim high. Pachas became maksev. If its height is less than this, or if it has fewer than 10 stories, or if it has 10 stories and not every one of them is a load for two men, it is like a quarry from which all stones may not be taken. Therefore, as is the case with the quarry, one may cut it down within a tefach of the ground, so that the ground underneath it remains unfit for planting. In which situation do these apply? When he's removing the stones from his own field, only then will he be suspected of clearing the ground for planting. But if he was hired to remove the stones from his friend's field or from a field for someone else, in which case he's removing the stones because he wants to use them, whatever he can remove whatever he wants. Lav Daki was hired, but he's going to the field in order to collect the stones because he wants the stones, and that's fine. When does this situation apply? This man when he did not start with removing the stones before Shemitah. So if he started clearing up the stones before Shemitah began, then there's no problem. But if he didn't start, he started after Shemitah started, then that's where this issue comes up. But if he started before Shemitah, who wants to no tell, then he could do whatever he wants and remove the stones on Shemitah without a problem. Because everyone's going to know this is already a place for stone gathering and not for planting. Moving right along, Mishnah Zayim, Avanim, Shizazasan, Amachrisha. If one has stones in his field that were loosened from the ground by the plow, or Shahayu Mechusos in the Skalum, or stones that have been covered with earth but were uncovered by the plow, though they were uncovered but they were not loosened. In Yesh Behem Shtayim Shemasle Shnayim Shnayim. Then, if among them there were two stones, each of which is a load for two men, Elu Yinatelu, then they can be removed from the field of Shemitah. On Shemitah, there's two reasons, there's two considerations for that rule. One is that the two large stones, mean each a load for one man, each a load for two men, are of a construction size usage. I mean, they're large enough. I mean, then the people will know that these stones are being taken to build for that purpose. And secondly, that any of the stones, even the smaller ones, will be easier after the plow goes over them again in the 8th year and loosens or uncovers them completely. Therefore, the fact that he's removing them now, despite the extra effort involved, indicates that he needs them for construction purposes, despite their small size. Given the combination of both factors, he's allowed to remove not only the large stones, but also all the stones that were loosened or uncovered. So continuing with the end of Mishnah Zayin, Hamisakel es Sadehu. When one clears his field from stones that are lying in layers on the surface of the field. No tel es yonos maniach es hanogos ba'aretz. He may take those that are on top, but he must leave those that touch the ground, that he will not appear to be preparing the ground for planting. V'chein garger shel srurus or gal shel avanim. Likewise, if there is a pile of pebbles or a heap of stones, no tel as ha oh yonos v'maniach as hanogos baris. He may take those that are on top, but he must leave those that touch the ground. However, if there is a layer of rock or straw underneath them, they may all be removed, even those at the bottom of the pile, because the area below is not fit for planting in any event. Mishnah Ches, Ein Bonin Madrigos Al Pi Hageayos Eres Sheviis Mishapasku Hageshamim. In the year before Shemitah, in the 6th year after the rainy season is over, which is like the springtime, when one may not build steps down to ravines where rainwater has collected. Why not? Because farmers would draw water from ravines to irrigate their fields. So they would build steps to make it easier for them to climb up and down the sides of the ravines. So clearly, if you are making these steps on after the rains have stopped, then clearly it's for use on Shemitah. If Neishu was Saknon, the Sheviis, because it appears as though he is preparing the steps to gather water to irrigate his fields on Shemitah. But on Shemitah itself, 1 year later, after the rainy season is over, he may build his steps. It is evident that he is preparing them for the purpose of irrigating his field the year after Shemitah. It's interesting because, by regular Shabbos, you can't do anything on Shabbos for preparation for after Shabbos. But here, in regards to Shemitah, you can prepare something on the 7th year for use after the 7th year, as we just discussed over here, which is very interesting. Although yismach ba'afar, it won't. You mean okay? Now we're going to talk about building a dam in the ravine on Shemitah to stop the water from flowing out. So one is not allowed to fortify the dam with earth, even after the rainy season is over on Shemitah. And you can't build a watertight dam of stones cemented together with earth or mortar. People think that it's to irrigate his field with whatever water remains in the ravine. Also, who chayes. So one may make a barrier of stones without earth or mortar, since such a barrier is not watertight. Kol even shehu yachal lifshot es yado any stone that he is able to take by extending his hand without leaving his position, such a stone may be taken if he does not move from the position he occupies when building the steps or dam. Then onlookers will assume that he has taken the stones for the steps or the dam, and therefore he can take it without having any issue or suspicion of planting, clearing the ground for planting. Almost done. Mishnah test. Avnei kasef bows b'kol shoulder stones, which we'll define soon, may be brought from any place, even one's own field. These are large stones that are used as construction material, and therefore people will assume that it's being taken for construction and not to clear the field. Kava may be b'kol makom, and a contractor can bring all types of stones from any place because they know that he's a contractor, he's not a farmer. The Elohein Avnei Kasif, and these are shoulder stones. Any stone that is so large that it cannot be carried with one hand, it must be carried in two hands or on one shoulder. Different Rabbi Meir, this is according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yossi says, Avnei Kasif Kishman. Shoulder stones are what is implied by their name. which is stones, which in the plural. Kol shein nitolosh time shalosh alakasi, meaning that any stone that carried 2 or 3 at a time on the shoulder is a shoulder stone. Kind of obvious. And finally, Mr. Yud, Habona Gader Beno the Uvin Rashus Harabim. If one wants to build a wall between his field and a public domain, and he needs to dig a foundation for it, what do the Hamik out of Selig allowed to dig down as far as the bedrock? This is permitted on Shemitah, even though it's making the land fit for planting, because he's unlikely to change his mind and decide to plant the area instead of building a wall. Ma Yasib, what does he do with the earth that he dug up? Sovro versus Rabin, he may pile it in the public domain, and later restore the public domain to its original condition by removing the earth and depositing it elsewhere. The rear of Yeshua, this is according to Yeshua. Rabbi Kiva, Omer, Rabbi Kiva says, Kadesh, and Kalkum, Rabin. This is one may not but damage the public domain by making a pile of earth there, even though it will be removed for shortly afterwards. Kach lo yiskanu, so too may one not repair a public domain by collecting dirt that's already there and heaping it into a pile, even if it will leave it there for only a short time. Ma yasaba first, and then what? Because ultimately people are going to dump it into the public thoroughfare, and they're not going to move it because they're going to rationalize it, not take care of it. Ma yasaba for what then may he do with the earth on Shemitah if you can't dump it in the public domain? Pile it up in his field in the same way as those who pile up the manure in their fields are allowed to do. You can make a big pile of it, like we discussed earlier in the Perek. And finally, a chofer bore the shiach umara. The same dispute applies with respect to one who digs a round pit, a ditch, or a vault next to the public area in a regular non-Shemitah year. According to Yeshua, as he digs up the earth, he may make piles of it in the public domain. But according to Akiva, he must keep the earth on his own land and may not dump it into the public domain for even just a short time. That is the end of Perek Gimel. Tomorrow, Mr. Shem, we will continue with Perek Daled. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for coming.